Welcome to Marcom Thinktank. Today, I am joined by Mark Jung, a VP of Marketing, B2B, SaaS sales extraordinaire, content master. He's here to talk to us today about brand moats.
Thanks so much, Eric. Excited to have the chance to get to dig in here. If you only take away one thing from this episode, is B2B should not be boring. At the end of the day, like, we're selling to people. One of the reasons why you've seen this evolution of people within companies building brands larger than the company itself, to a point where people buy from people they like, trust, respect, value. That's led to this evolution where B2B can push the boundaries to be more like B2C. So don't be boring. You should be thinking about sandcastles, moats, dragons, like, bring the inspiration. Don't be thinking about the serious decision playbooks from 1999 that everyone's been doing. Find a way to build something that's going to help you stand out, be relevant and meaningful for your audience in a way that's going to be disruptive and fun. And that's really the whole premise around everything that I believe that helps to build a moat. So excited to dig in.
That's awesome. You talk about, most of that customer experience now. I mean, everybody is kind of, enamored with that customer experience that Amazon or Netflix or even Apple provides. And that is a B2C type relationship, right? And so you see companies almost mirroring that relationship, right? So the way that we talk now is supposed to be more common language, rather than maybe in our line of business, which is, of course, software, is a little bit more techie, right? So not so technical, but more kind of loosen the jacket or unbutton the collar, so to speak.
Yes. One of the biggest things that I wish I had done earlier in my career, so I ended up studying a formal sort of like academic track and was doing business psychology and philosophy of all things. And in philosophy, it was rewarded to have extravagant language and these rhetorical flourishes. But in the business world, what I realized is that the clarity wins, full stop. The simplest language that feels authentic, that connects to your audience, wins. And one of the simplest things you can do tactically that I found really useful, and I use it before I send a connection request, email invites, whatever it might be, is read what you are saying out loud. And if it sounds like a cheesy infomercial, or every third word has 3 hyphens, or it's filled with jargon, all in one, best in class, synergistic, full stop, accelerative marketing, you're probably like, that's not going to connect with my audience. Read it out loud. And at the end of the day, focus on clarity and just being authentic. And no matter what space you're in, I promise I've seen conversion rates increase from as much as 40 or 50% when jargon gets dropped and you connect with your audience and you bring clarity. Not all marketing needs to feel packaged up. In my experience, the best marketing doesn't feel like marketing. Your audience get what you're saying, they connect with you. And when you're coming from a place of empathy and you're being real, that's usually where the magic happens.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So, when we talk about, I don't know, the difference between like showing your personality, right? That dare to be different, is that a risk that people take, or is it outside the norm? I was listening to a podcast you did earlier, and one of the things that you talked about was, being from a startup, or from a seed to a startup to a mature company. Are some of those philosophies easier to introduce from the ground up, or do you think mature companies can adopt them later in life and kind of, again, show their true personality?
Yeah, so my big belief is that actually playing it safe is a larger risk than actually pushing some boundaries. And the reason why is that if you look at, for example, Pure Signal. So my previous head of content at Julie, sort of 2 gigs ago, has just joined Pure Signal, and they've scraped about probably like 370 popular SaaS, B2B SaaS homepages. And when they did that analysis, about 70 to 75% looked and felt identical. And what that means is sort of my pseudo trademark, as I call the sea of SaaS. You could take almost any messaging, any website, no matter what it is, and you could swap it out, swap the logo, and it's going to feel or say the same thing. You look at the sales space, we're going to help you close more leads, accelerate your revenue, win more deals, right? And I find that no matter what stage of business you're at, the hardest, I guess the biggest learning that I've had is as you grow to Series C, Series D, Series E, there is, and I'd say, less appetite for risk unless the leadership are bought in, or if growth has stalled. So if you have a business that's growing, more than 100% year over year, and it's not getting saturated, you're not seeing it become, too commoditized, there's still growth potential, there's expansion, then the playbook is working and people feel comfortable. But if you're starting to see you become an incumbent in the space, you've lost share of voice, you've lost that sort of ethos that helped you grow, then I find that there is more of an appetite to take risks. The problem with that is sometimes it could be too late. If you've lost to a player who may have been like an early stage startup, like if you take a look at some of even Salesforce, for example, everyone said the CRM space is closed, right? It's been won. And you see time and time again, you look at companies who have come into a market that has been won and they've pushed boundaries, they've been disruptive. So I'd say it really doesn't matter what stage you are in. You may have more of an uphill battle at a Series E company who's focused on really like their metrics around getting IPO ready if they filed their S1 already, versus a seed stage startup that has nothing to lose, that just needs to get on the map or get funding or it dies. But at the end of the day, again, playing it safe from my perspective is like the biggest risk, because you just become part of that sea of SaaS. And I think the more tactical piece is when you look at, for example, the book Play Bigger. If you haven't had a chance to read it, would highly recommend. They look at some of the top companies in the world, Fortune 500, Cloud 100, and what they've shown is that growth year over year is up to 40 to 70% higher at companies who have built a category defining strategy where they are positioning themselves as different and not better. One of the challenges when you go to a conference where every platform and every booth says we are the number one X in the same space, and there's like 7 back to back, is you get compared against each other. It becomes a battle of features and price and, oh, well, they deliver X. But when you position yourself as different in your own stream, so one of the reasons why, and I talk a lot about this, Gong is on the path to a $10 billion IPO, and Chorus was acquired for less than $750 million by ZoomInfo, virtually the same product, but Gong took risks, they were bold, and they positioned themselves as different, not better. So again, push those boundaries, build leadership alignment. But if you're not working for a CEO or leadership team that believes in that, it's gonna be really hard to be successful as a marketer.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, you know, Marcom, we've been around 20 years in the kind of this game. And so you can see that same thing. It's almost just it's become a homogenization almost of messages being sent. So I really like that idea of maybe not showing your personality, but being different in some way, right? Because you are right. The feature set sometimes totally aligns. But I also like the idea of disruptors, right? To say that a certain space is closed is a kind of a bold statement. And there's always room for competition, always room for improvement, because some of the things that get stale sometimes as well might be user interface, right? Or even that loss of experience kind of resting on your laurels a little bit, so to speak. So.
Oh yeah, and you look at, for example, the CS space, right? Even when Gainset was coming up and people were saying to them, oh, the customer success market, the total addressable market isn't large enough. Right, Gainsight has built a multi-billion-dollar market cap, and you're seeing a massive boom of newer companies like Upzello and Catalyst who are in this space, who are trying to capitalize on that in a macroeconomic climate where we're not in the wild west of last year where growth at all costs is what's getting funding, right? We're at a place where now there's a cost to capital, right? It's 3 to 5% as opposed to the 0% world we were in before. And these companies are saying, hey, we can take risks, we can be bold, and they're challenging the perspective on, it's probably one of the hardest things to do as a marketer, but there's an adage, you don't get fired for buying IBM, right? We are in a market now where there's, I'd say, less appetite for risk because you don't want to put your neck on the line. And I got a chance to partner with the authors of the book, The Jolt Effect. So shout out to sort of Matt Dixon and Rory and that team. It's an amazing book. It's been one of the top. I think they're still the #1 bestseller on Amazon right now in the sales space. It's all about how to identify and navigate indecision in the market. When you can help to tell a story that mitigates the perceived risk of moving forward with your business, that is how you can translate a story of being different, not better, to an appetite for buyers to engage with you when they could go buy a Gainsight and not get fired, even if it's only going to do 60% of what you need. But that is probably the best combination of really like category clarity and like category strategy that I'm seeing today, is when you can minimize risk and really create more of an interest around like demand creation, right? I think there's a big gap in the market where people still don't see the difference between capturing demand and creating demand, right? If someone knows a service exists and are looking for it, some amazing demand capture marketers who are great at SEO, right? And they're great at affiliate and they're great at partner work may struggle with demand creation when they need to build something. So that's where I'm a big believer in like building a moat and building something that's going to generate interest in your space. Because if people aren't looking for you, you need to find a way where they're aware of you. And then once you're on their radar, then you can help tell them that story to kind of move them through your funnel.
Yeah, so that's so great segue right there. So talk to me a little bit more about like creating a media arm and really what is a brand moat?
Yeah, so there's this idea right now in marketing where every company wants to become a media company. The problem is a lot of companies still think about it the wrong way. They think, oh, we're being a media company by promoting our webinars, which is bottom of funnel content that's going to get very little engagement when you try to promote it top of funnel. And they think that they're doing the right things. But at the end of the day, a media company is you're treating your content like a product. You're not thinking about your service or what you're trying to sell. It is really that simple, right? Build amazing content around the problem that you're solving that your audience cares about. Full stop. When you're doing that, you're building authority, you're building credibility, and you're building really like a relationship with your audience to start building raving fans. So the idea around a brand moat is that, for example, look at the example, we'll stay on the CS side, Gainsight, for example. Gainsight's been in the game a long time, right? They're known as a safe choice, but can sometimes be cumbersome, right? Legacy, it's the same way that Salesforce has become this behemoth where they're, right, growing massively through acquisition, but no one loves putting data into Salesforce, right? You see some of these newer players coming up in the market who are saying, hey, there are a lot of problems in the CS space that really no one have paid attention to. Look at the number of podcasts, look at the number of newsletters that are just customer success focused. There have been so few. And when you see these opportunities in the market to find a problem where people care about it, build content. And the biggest thing here is making sure that you have, in the media arm sense, product channel fit. So in simplest form is making sure that the content you are creating aligns to the channels that you are distributing around. One of the most common mistakes I see marketers make is they don't design content with the channel that they plan to distribute. So for example, if you are designing content that is massive long form and you're trying to promote that long form content with someone who's like scrolling through an Instagram feed or Facebook, and you're expecting them to sort of, disassociate from just 10 p.m. before bed, doom scrolling on Instagram, and you want them to download and read a 3,000 page ebook and then you're going to send them like a sales touch. Like obviously I'm being hyperbolic here, but like think about matching your content to that channel and like meeting your audience where they are. I think that's one of the reasons why most marketers struggle to build that media arm. And you're seeing why companies like HubSpot acquired The Hustle and why, Paddle acquired Profitwell. Shout out to Patrick Campbell for everything he did, PC for building really like one of the best media arms in their space. Companies are saying, hey, if we can't do this ourselves, we're going to acquire and we're going to develop that base. But like coming back full circle, a brand moat helps you position yourself as different and not better. It helps you build something where you have defensibility in the space because of your reputation, not because of your product or your features. So again, when we come back and we look at Gong versus Chorus, why did Gong win the market and have a 10x valuation of Chorus? It's because they built a media arm, they built a relationship with their audience, and they were able to create a connection at scale where there were raving fans. So when anyone asked on a forum on LinkedIn, hey, I'm looking at Gong versus Chorus, there's 100 times participation from, Gongster fans. And that is where you get that flywheel where brand fuels demand and demand fuels brand.
Now, when you talk about that, the creation of a media arm, and Gong's a great example. I mean, I don't know a marketer who's not really a fan of Gong. It's fantastic. But how long does that take? I mean, is it a timeline that you can expect? I know that, we say marketing's an investment, right? It's something that takes time to mature. What is it would be an expected timeline to build a robust media arm and to build that kind of influence circle?
So I think I would always challenge marketers not to think about it in terms of how long it's going to take to do X, because really at the end of the day, building a media arm never stops, right? Yeah. A media arm can be as simple as one, building a founder-led brand with your CEO and your story. It can be as simple as buying a Yeti mic and getting a piece of paper and recording a podcast around the manifesto of why the problem that you're solving with your CEO and getting other like-minded people to come. It can be as simple as posting every day on LinkedIn around your philosophy. And it's really just a matter of scale. The biggest thing that I see marketers struggle with, and you can see this in podcast statistics, the number of podcasts that start and never make it beyond one season is massive. It is a huge delta. If you're looking at sort of the crossing the chasm and that gap, marketers start, and then because they don't see immediate results, they're like, oh, the media arm isn't working, or even worse, the board or leadership say, hey, we've created a full season of our podcast, but we're not seeing an impact on this dashboard. Right. So what I always say is treat brand and media as an investment. The one change tactically that you can make today when you're talking with your CFO, your CEO, whatever stage of company you're at, is do not speak about marketing costs, marketing budget, speak about marketing investment. Everyone wants to cut costs, but everyone wants to double down and increase their investments. That one simple change in language changes the psychology of how you're having conversations. But really, like, you can spin up a media arm in 3 days. It really doesn't have to be complicated. It's just your audience will tell you when you're being successful. If you can find more people in your ideal customer profile that are following you, engaging with your content, asking questions, demonstrating a commitment and an interest in interacting with you, that's when you're starting to see that success. So try to find those early wins, build visibility with your C-suite. And remember, at the end of the day, if you're not capturing some form of attribution, throw up on a forum. Where did you hear about us? Make it required, get some open text answers, and more often than not, you'll say, hey, your podcast, your CEO on LinkedIn. That starts to help build that credibility where leadership are like, oh, okay, I see that there is some short term and also sort of the long tail that they're going to be expecting.
Yeah. Yeah. So, interesting. Like, I used to work in the music business in a former life. It seems that long ago. And a lot of those things is, it becomes kind of glamorized, right? It's like that meme, what your mom thinks you do, what your friends think you do, and what you actually do, right?
Yes.
I mean, so like creating content, like that, it's a challenge, right? I mean, and to hone that skill set. So, I mean, how do you even come up with sometimes content ideas? Like, what's the process?
I find that the best source of inspiration for content tends to be understanding really like what your audience cares about. And getting tactical here, one of my favorite tools for doing this is SparkToro. So check it out, Rand Fishkin. It helps you understand, once you've defined sort of your rough hypotheses around like segments or personas, where your audience live, where are they consuming content. From there, you can go and look at, okay, what type of content are they engaging with? What problems are they looking to solve? Where are you seeing like pockets of what I call like engagement? And then from there, I would break down, hey, it looks like, come back to the CS space, people are really interested in the handoff process. How can I build better handoff from my account executives to my CS team where it's not just deals getting thrown over the fence? Interesting. People are looking for tactical tips. That's where they're going. Okay, amazing. Who are the best CS leaders I know that I could come on and do a deep dive on tactical tips? Maybe we do a virtual event. We find a way to make it fun. We do some in-person experiences, and maybe we do some like guerrilla marketing where we create a parallel of like, I don't know, a terrible relay race, right? Where people are in, massive blow-up costumes and we do some PR around it. Like, get creative, but at the end of the day, find where people are engaging around a problem and see where you can put your unique stamp on it. The second thing that I do is I look outside of my industry. Typically, I don't want to like be a little bit jaded, but B2B companies tend to not take as many risks as D2C, e-com, some of the B2C players. My best inspiration for B2B tends to come outside of that realm. So really like become an expert at curating what some of your favorite brands are doing and use the same principles that they are in testing new content ideas. When you can take a concept, like for example, I'm working on this interesting sound engineering brand play right now. It's very much in the alpha stage, but Taco Bell created a signature sound a few years back. And they actually partnered with the city of London to have that sound come from Big Ben and echo all across London. And it became a massive phenomenon. It went viral and it helped like create this association to that sound in Taco Bell. And name one B2B company right now that's thinking about that, right? So that's kind of, understand your audience, find the problems they're engaging with, Take some of the ideas where you can win and apply something unique that the space isn't doing, and then look for inspiration outside of your realm where you can apply some of those principles to your space. And that's like a hyper simplified version of the formula that I use.
I like that insight. So then, is there an ultimate success metric for this kind of endeavor with your content? Is there anything that you're measuring, like from a, maybe a KPI, or from something that's is measurable, or is it just something that happens?
From my perspective, like I track a number, and I'll give you sort of my recommendations. The core metrics that you can influence that a lot of marketers don't think you can influence are the key metrics that most businesses care about, which is your average contract value, your sales cycle length, your win rate, and really like fundamentally pipeline coverage. And, you need 3x, 5x, and how your pipeline is building towards converting. And those are the fundamental metrics from like a revenue perspective that I would always align with my CRO and our entire go-to-market team. Mm-hmm. And the reason that I would do that is because when you're having an impact on revenue and people are seeing your expertise in the market, not everyone is willing to buy or ready to buy when they see your content. But when you can influence them and start to position yourself as a authority with credibility that they trust and that they like, mm-hmm. you then start to see your win rate versus competitive deals increase. You tend to see faster sales cycles. You tend to see, again, like your discovery may go one session instead of two. You tend to see your ACV increase because you can sell larger packages out of the gates because people trust you. You also tend to see like your expansion go up because it's easier for you to sell in and then start to work with your CS team on, for example, like I've been at multiple companies where we've sold into one unit in the go-to-market team. I've been added SDRs, CS, enablement, RevOps after that. Beyond that, I tend to track my engagement within our ideal customer profile. So let's say that we're targeting our most successful segment is like mid-market B2B companies with X employees, X tech stack, whatever the profile is. I'd say, okay, how many of those companies and players are following our content, subscribing to our newsletter, coming to our events, listening to our podcast? And then I look at like our share of voice versus competitors in that space. And I'm a big fan of tools like Mutiny in combination with Clearbit to help you actually like de-anonymize and identify who those companies are. And then you can use other tools that help you like scrape social to see who's engaging with your content. And you can match that. So you can say, hey, these 30 people at Lyft have been engaging with our content over the last week. And here's the 12 people at Lyft on our pricing page. Hey, SDR team, go touch these 12 people. And oftentimes when they do, they're like, hey, I've been following your content for 6 months. You get these qualitative pieces of feedback that you can combine with like the dashboard metrics, which help tell a story. And that ends up painting a really powerful picture. The most important tends to be showing the difference between quality of leads. So not all leads are created equal. You're going to see a lot of leads that don't convert, that have a low win rate, that are like ebook downloads or webinars. But when you can start driving high quality leads, demos, talk to sales, and you see that lead source is coming from your media arm, that is the most powerful indicator to leadership that what you're building is driving revenue in addition to authority in your space.
It's definitely just ultimately brand awareness, right? It's almost your trusted friend in the industry, whether or not you're Apple or maybe State Farm Insurance, right? You have that kind of neighborly, friendly vibe that, hey, I can reach out, even though I'm not going to buy anything, I can at least talk to them and reach out and see what's happening.
You want to mitigate risk. You want to mitigate risk and you want to be top of mind. So when someone is ready to buy, you are the person that they are thinking of, right? That is, it's really like people buy from brands and people they like and trust. And it's really like there's more complexity to that, but the brand and the media arm helps you build those two things in one of the most scalable ways that you can build organically without a ton of budget. And I know because I've done that from a place of having zero budget as the first marketer in a 7-person company and scaling that towards, a 300 million plus valuation during the pandemic, just from building creative strategies that helped us separate from larger players in the pack that weren't taking risks to build a moat.
So when you have this moat, or when your arm is functioning, if you say, right, I guess that's a good way to put it, what would be some of the best distribution tools? You mentioned a couple tools that you use, but is there better channels to distribute this than others?
So I think that's one of the biggest things that I say is one channel is never better than another in the abstract. It all depends on who your customer is and where they live, which is one of the reasons why I really like SparkToro from Rand Fishkin for helping you identify where your users live. At the end of the day, I always recommend this framework, and it's from Joanna Wiebe at Copy Hackers. It's one of the simplest ways you can start to understand your customer is you take 10, 20, 30 customer calls, usually like a demo discovery, and you map out in chronological order, like what they say in what order, what are their questions, what are their concerns, and it helps you get a really clear understanding of the problems that they are looking to solve, how they perceive your product, and it's really amazing for building like positioning frameworks. I do the same when I make a list from SparkToro and I go reach out and talk to people that feel representative of our hypotheses around like segments and personas. And then I do the same thing. I say, hey, like of the top places that you're going right now, like walk me through what's the number 1 through number 3. Okay, why do you like that? What type of content is there? Great, like what do you wish there was more of? And when you do this, even your first 5 conversations, you can then start to break down like by your personas and segments where you should focus. For one company, Instagram may crush and be terrible for another, right? You need to make sure that you are going where your audience is and you're making sure that you have product channel fit to understand that your product can be distributed effectively in that channel in a way where like your customer acquisition cost and like your average revenue per unit is not in the red zone. And what I mean by that is if you're spending $5,000 to acquire a lead, but your average revenue per unit is 500, and you really need to have more of a product-led motion, you're going to be in a dead zone where you have really bad, right? Like really bad metrics. So start to think about the ways where like the fundamental unit economics of your business work. And if you know that you have a freemium product that is $7 per month per user, unless you're doing massive scale, you probably need to approach the right channel mix to make that work. And I think too often marketers ignore just like the fundamental business metrics around channel strategy. But when you combine those with understanding where your audience live today and where the opportunity is, that's where you can really find like the sweet spot where brands aren't engaging and you can, be really targeted. I'll give you a good example. And this was when I was early at Dooley. So Dooley is sort of a revenue workspace, like a notes platform built on top of Salesforce. So we make Salesforce data entry easier for B2B revenue teams. And when I was there, again, I'm the only marketer, we have very little budget, and we're trying to raise funding and grow through the pandemic. What I realized was that sales was stressful. No matter who you are, if you're a VP of sales at Microsoft or an account executive at a 10-person startup, it's stressful. And sales leaders, SDRs, AE, they needed an outlet for that. So I noticed that there was a massive community in the sales humor space with hundreds of thousands of people engaging on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram, but less than 2 brands were actually creating content in that space. So I went outbound, I emailed the folks that ran these communities, formed some partnerships, and within 60 days, we had built what I call a meme acquisition engine, where we actually increased our web traffic by over 3,000% month over month for like a 6-month window. And we were able to generate almost like 40,000 organic content impressions within a few months on very little money, because we could create content that was like social, emotional, engaging. It met our users where they were. And we weren't trying to get them to install or like take a demo. We just wanted them to connect to their problem, and then they would search Dooley, or they'd book a demo, or they'd sign up and use the platform. And that's a sort of a tactical example of that overlap where there's white space where no one's playing. We understood the channel strategy and how to meet with content. Like if we were promoting webinars, they would have gotten no engagement and no one would have been interested, but we'd have a meme of Fat Thor saying what your meeting notes actually look like, and Rip Thor saying what you think your notes look like. And that's something where managers would tag AEs and AEs would tag managers, and it created like a fun, engaging sort of brand engine for us that really started to fuel our growth and our funding beyond.
Yeah, it's kind of like, hey, they get me kind of thing, right? I mean, that's what you're talking about. You meet them there. It's interesting you bring up the idea of a freemium product too. Sometimes, especially in SaaS, that there is paths to upgrades, right? And so what is your opinion of, scaling business models or even feature sets based off of those packages? And is that a good strategy to lead towards, say, take from a freemium all the way to an enterprise grade? Are those successful trends to migrate those people?
At the end of the day, I think it really depends on your product your offering and your capacity to monetize. So the biggest thing that I recommend if you're new to sort of pricing and monetization strategy is run something called a Van Westendorp survey. And basically what this does is you ask people at what point your product would be too expensive, too priced too low that it feels cheap. And you basically create this hit box where like on a graph, and you can throw one up sort of in post where it shows sort of the lines, and it helps you understand your market's perception of where you could price your product. And from there, the next thing you should do is like understand how your users get value. Too many companies, I think, default to, oh, we have to be a SaaS company, therefore we need SaaS pricing like per user per seat because we want to get more multiples in our VC raise. And if we're a services business, we're going to get 3 to 5x. But if we're a SaaS business, we can get 30x. And I think you really need to understand how your users get value. When I look at some of the biggest players in the market that have been successful, my previous CRO, Tony Jackson, when he was coming from Snowflake, had a chance to really go deep with him and understand the transition they made to usage-based pricing. The biggest challenge at Snowflake, and would definitely recommend checking out some of the recent literature around this and the case studies, or even go and read, the book from the leaders there, is they were having growth, but it wasn't as fast as it could be. And what they realized was the way that they were incentivizing their reps to sell was not driving value for the customer. Really oversimplified way, they changed their model to a usage-based model where they were incentivizing their revenue team to sell and have customers increase usage. When customers increased usage, they got more value and they were then willing to pay more. And I think when you're thinking about your pricing model, understand how your audience gets value. Does it work with a SaaS model, or are you forcing it for some type of VC vanity metric around raising? And can you scale this in a way that's going to help you grow to a point where your Van Westendorp really like validates your ideas? If you think you can charge $50 for something, but your audience only wants to pay $5 and there's not a willingness, you're going to crash and burn. So this is bringing sort of another sort of 3-part analysis around business strategy, appetite, and the flywheel of adding value versus paying more, and how you can scale that motion up.
It's really interesting. I mean, that there's a lot of, you said startups, even that they fail. I mean, 70 to 90% of startups fail, right? Is it not due diligence? Is not understanding your market? I mean, is a certain catalyst that makes those startups fail?
There's so much complexity to this, and it's even worse than that, right? Like you look at the progression from we'll start with seed to Series A. You're looking at close to like a 70% failure rate at the last data that I looked at. Again, you can search this. There's a great article on Medium. I'll mention in the footnotes towards or the show notes. You're looking at about like a 70% failure rate. And from there, you reduce that percentage by about like 3 to 5% from A to B. So 65% fail to raise from A to B and then beyond. So at the end of the day, I think the shortest version of this answer is startups are tough. And finding product market fit is tough. And this is where I'm a huge fan of Brian Balfour over at Reforge. I think one of the things that as a marketer, one of the best things you can do is understand business strategy, but not in a way where you become a corporate drone. Like I gave up my suit and tie from management consulting for sneakers and SaaS, and I'll never look back. But Brian Balfour has an amazing article. It's called The 4 Fits Model. And that's why I talk about product channel fit. It's not just product market fit, which you've probably heard a ton about. It's about a multi-step model around how to build a successful business. And there's more avenues than just product market fit. Would highly recommend going deep. It's probably one of the cornerstone articles that changed how I think about marketing. And it's really like the bedrock that everything that I believe in today.
Definitely. You've given lots of suggestions on books and articles throughout the talk here today. I mean, really great stuff, Mark.
No, this has been really fun. And I'm really appreciate you having me on, Eric. For those that want to learn more, definitely give me a follow on LinkedIn, Mark P. Young. Piece of tactical advice there. If you want to avoid automation, getting a lot of, automated messages on LinkedIn, throw an initial from your middle name up there. And that's why I know Mark P. Young, or throw an emoji in front of your name. So it helps you weed out the real messages from the fake. So end with a little tactical tip that, may spare your inbox a little bit. But if you like what you heard, definitely send me a follow and tell me what you liked about the episode or what you'd like to learn more about. We'll be launching a course in the new year around this and all of my learnings on how to really build a challenger brand and a moat and scale from sort of, unknown all the way through Series B and beyond. So Eric, thanks for having me, man. This has been fun, and looking forward to running it back again in the future.
Dropping the knowledge. I really do appreciate it. It's been informing. And Marcom Think Tank Series 3 on a wrap here, and we'll see you on the next time.